Hi, you're listening and watching Launch Left. I am your host, Rain Phoenix. Today's very special guest is John Vanderslice launching Spacemoth. Don't forget, rate and subscribe. Follow us on all socials at LaunchLeft. Crystals 3.0, how are you? What the fuck?
I am doing good. Yeah, it's some fucked up music, right?
I love it. I've been listening to it on repeat. I will highly recommend it. I love it, and I feel so honored to be talking with you. I got hooked on, like I have it going in my head, which I know is like maybe this isn't the record you thought that would happen with, but It's very catchy to me.
Yeah.
You as an artist are so powerful is what I mean. I can just feel that you follow your creative truth. Everyone has it. We're all here for a reason. We can find it. We can not find it. We can dedicate our lives to it. We can not. It seems to me that you have, and that you follow your passion to do art. Is that a fair assessment?
It feels fair, and it feels like I immediately feel guilty for admitting that, but I think that the road to getting to a place where I was even comfortable, it's hard as hell to look yourself in the mirror, much less like actually release a record that you feel comfortable about existing in the world. And it took me decades to figure out how to get beyond that kind of like self-recrimination. And something happened to me where I realized that like if I accelerate my release schedule, it actually becomes blurry, where each individual record doesn't hold this. There's something that happens with everyone that puts out records. It's never enough. Whatever happens upon release, and I'm sure you have that, like whatever we do, the feeling never meets up with like your expectations. So to balance that out, an artist told me just keep putting out records. So I started this schedule where basically I got off a label, and I started releasing records about twice a year. And when you do that, you just can't keep track of your own reactions, responses. Your ego becomes drained out because you're simply so busy like engaging with actual like creative process, as opposed to the back end, which is very toxic for us. How are people receiving it? And, in music, once I think you disconnect it from a touring cycle, that really helps. I don't feel like there's any like boundaries between records. Like I just put out records, and then maybe I go on tour for a little bit and then come back and make another record. So I think that through hard work of overdosing myself on music, that I don't care as much, like as far as like judging myself, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, holding yourself against some sort of external validation mirror, which is really what I think that kind of beating yourself up thing is. So it seems like you've found a combination of things that has really led you to a deeper sense of peace as an artist, maybe. Yeah. That's what I'm hearing.
100%, definitely. And also I think that it's like really helped me to, for a long time I was putting out records in like a lane. I believed that I was like, I'm like an indie artist that's interested in like kind of like art pop records and prog and like kind of like psychedelic songwriting. And so I really saw myself as operating in this lane that was like influenced by Destroyer, the Mountain Goats, David Bowie, like the Kinks, like this certain kind of like identity. And that stuff just kind of just fell apart for me, where I began to be like really bored with my own desire to write a song that had a coherent narrative and coherent lyrics. Something about that felt like very normie to me, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't with a straight face sit down with an acoustic guitar or a piano and actually write a song and think like, oh, here's the bridge and this song is in this key, and you know what I mean? Like the narrator believes this. All that stuff became not necessary for me personally. Like I certainly listened to tons and tons of like music that would adhere to those rules. But, and when that happened, I maybe was a little bit more free in how I felt about like what could actually be put on a record. And then I started thinking, why does it have to be a record? Why can't it be like Crystals? Why can't it be like 14 songs in 19 minutes? Like, why do we have to have these like 3 minute, 4 minute? Like, why do we have to just like keep, and it's hard to get out of these little lanes, but I don't know. And it took me a long time. It took me a long time to edit the record. I mean, the record was probably recorded over a year, and it took me about 6 months to just be able to like even have song titles where I could be like, okay, this should follow this. This is the point of this. And, it's not like as you mentioned before, it's not like an experimental slog. It's a pop record. Like somehow this is like a joyous, fun, even if there's like unruly sounds and fucked up distortion, it is a total pop record, like it's just blown up and it's fragmented like an acid trip, it is acid influenced,
I'm a big fan of, just like messing with things, like everything that is supposed to be a certain way. Why not do it the other? Like, why not flip it on the head? Like, okay, those are hard won things, people, like you were talking about the chords of a thing and the bridge comes here and all, and the key of this. At the same time, I'm a total sucker for that. And like you said, I listen to all those records and love them. So I'm not dissing on it, but I love experimental music, for example. I love non-vocal experimental music.
Yeah.
Noise. I love noise music, those kinds of things. And so this record really turned me on in that regard as well. And that you like chose to have that each song was so short, was like, what?
Yeah.
But I really thought that was great in this current to ADD age that we're in. I'm like, good for you. Like, that's a pop song, not even 3 minutes anymore. You can't even.
It's 1 minute.
Exactly. I thought it was so great. And it's like you flip things on the head, but it was so refreshing. That's why I like that. Is it to me, I'm like, thank you. Open my eyes to something new. I love the other stuff, but I always want to be surprised. That's what it is, And so, I know you talked about psychedelics. Was there anything else in particular that really inspired you for this record or really brought you, or was, is it I know it took a decade since your last release, but so many things stands out.
I think that like a couple things that were really important. You always need like an artist for like, you need like a guiding spirit, right? So for me, there's this LA kind of experimental artist. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. His name is Slauson Malone, and he's just made 2 records, and they're very fragmentary. It's like Crystal's vibe, where it's like they're short. The songs just kind of weave in and out. Sometimes nothing happens, and sometimes it's a coherent song that's like really beautiful. And that record, especially his first one, was like that was a really big deal for me, because it like somehow it did this trick where if you were to listen to each of those snippets, it's like almost like it's the record gained momentum by being really well edited and kind of interwoven. Somehow it like everything gained a little bit more meaning, And that was a big deal. And then there's this kind of musician producer named Arca, who made a continuous record I think it's about maybe 60 minutes, and it's just one track, and it's called it's the at sign, like on a keyboard. It's at. It's 5 ats. And that record came out like 3 years ago, I think. And that was probably the biggest record for me in the maybe 3 or 4 years. Like that was probably the thing that changed me the most, because it's music that should not work really at all. It's really just like almost like pastiche. It's like 100 pastiche, noisy, fucked up, sampley moments that have cohered into, especially the first like 33 minutes of that record is like, it's the most perfect, risky music I've ever heard in my life. So those 2 records, the Arca record and the Slauson Malone record, I was like, oh, this is a good, like, you can do this. Like, to me, it's refreshing to be like, oh, you can just put a song on Spotify that's 60 minutes long. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like ridiculous, like, and it's so beautiful. And when I saw that, I was like, I'm all in on this. Like, this is courageous,
Yeah. That's so lovely to hear the inspiration coming from other artists, which I think is inevitable and true. We all that we get, we garner our own inspiration from others so often, and I'm so curious of your influence. I guess you basically shared for this particular record, but you know, I actually am going to turn now to. I'm thinking about Tiny Telephone. That's the name of your studio
Yeah,
in San
yeah.
Francisco. Is that still open? And
So I used to own two studios, one in San Francisco and one in Oakland, and COVID knocked out the one in San Francisco. I mean, also the rent situation knocked us out.
yeah.
We were paying $7,000 a month at the end, and I mean that would probably be nine now. It's like just untenable for a studio. But the one in Oakland is going, thank God, and that's how I really live through the studio. I live in Los Angeles. My friends run the studio in Oakland, and I really live off that studio plus that and touring. And um, so the studio, thank God, still exists because otherwise I'd probably have to have a job. I'm like actually be in the workforce, which would be a nightmare, complete nightmare. Um, and like it gives me a lot of some freedom, like it's my life is definitely like uh financially tricky often, but like, and my girlfriend and me, we're just like top level scammers. I mean, we just, whatever it is, we're on it. Food stamps, Medi-Cal, like whatever it takes, stealing from Whole Foods, like whatever it takes to get by. We're not gonna, we're not gonna work. You know what I mean? Like we're just not gonna do it.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I'll work at music, but that's a very low profit margin vibe.
It really is. I hear you. I are you? Would you consider yourself a gear slut?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely like addicted to, especially to electronic um instruments. Like I definitely have like a lot of, I mean, I'll show you, this is the studio, but I'm definitely pretty obsessed with keyboards
Ooh,
and modular synths, and it is, taken up a huge
whoa!
percentage of energy and money from me for forever. I've been collecting since I was 15, so,
Oh
and it
shit!
and these tools like they're inspiring, they're confounding, they're temperamental, and they have, the best designed gear actually kind of like is a co-writer for you. There's like plenty of instruments that I have that like are really responsible for the music. I mean, there's these weirdo electron drum machine synthesizers that came out in the early 2000s, and they're really the sound of Crystal 3.0, or these two weird Swedish drum modules that came out that you can't buy anymore, that are just like filled with other people's saved drum patterns that I would just like listen to and modify or not. And so it's this like beautiful hand me down, like you're just like finding these like gems, these crystals, that's really where the name came from, was like finding these beautiful things that may or may not have properties, and they may or may not have the properties that you think they do, but they take on iconic, you know, meanings to you.
If you couldn't, for some unfair reason, make music, do you think that you would just like collect and engineer, or did you like the studio a lot? Is that something you think you would, or would you say that, I know that's sort of a hypothetical. We can skip that
No, I
question. I
I
don't
get
know.
I think about that all the time because I think about like one day I'm might not want to make music. You know what I mean? Like, so what is like what do I pivot to? And like it's funny because we my girlfriend and we have a garden in the backyard. Like I think about like, and I definitely am a real kind of collector obsessive. I like to have things around me. I like to have these iconically visually beautiful things. And like I think about where would I put my attention to? What would I obsess about? My next door neighbor in LA is obsessed with cars. And he is like a driveway filled with cars. I'm not really drawn to cars because I think that they're really the reason why we're going to be snuffed out, and we're snuffing out the rest of living beings is like the combustible engine. So I think that cars are inherently evil, but I understand this like desire to collect, to modify, and to to hold and to covet things, But I honestly think that I would, if I like didn't do music, that I would become obsessed with gardening. Like I think that like gardening gives me the most pleasure just from an outward, you know, like watching we have a small garden. It's very functional. We eat off our garden almost if we eat at home, we have stuff from our garden. And
so nice.
So, I think about landscaping, gardening, stuff like that. Like that's probably what I would like obsess about.
That's so nice. And that's such a creative outlet as well.
Yeah. Oh,
it's a kind of art form. Yeah.
Just like what you were saying before. That is to be a gardener, to grow your own food is like, it is high art,
Yeah, absolutely. Would you have sold all your gear, or would you still be collecting while being a gardener?
God, I think if I got out of music, I would sell my gear because it's worth so much money.
Yeah.
I'm always worried about like missing the peak because this stuff can't last forever,
Right.
So I would sell. Oh yeah. I mean, because I'm always that's how I survive. Also, when I closed the San Francisco studios, I closed them 3 years ago, and I still sell the gear from those studios. I still have it in storage, and I just have listings for parts I sell knobs of like like a preamp on my store on eBay and Reverb. It's how I survive, really.
I'm gonna ask a really stupid question because I remember visiting REM in San Francisco when they were doing Up. Do you know if they did they do Up at your studio?
No, that's not a stupid question. I know that they did that record at Toast, which are friends of mine, or were friends of mine. They moved to England, but like I've been to that studio 100 times, and I remembered when they recorded in San Francisco, that was like a big deal in this recording studio community. I mean, Toast was a much nicer studio than what we had. Like they were in. That was a classic Bill Putnam room. Like that was a fancier place than what we had for sure.
You seem to be someone who's comfortable with unattachment or something.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm 100% comfortable with I think that I'm really
non-attachment. You're right. That's the right word, right?
Yes.
Non-attachment.
Yes. Yeah. I think that I'm really comfortable with like being like not attached to like physical things, but I think with people that it's really difficult for me. Like I think that because of like trauma and stuff that like friends, my girlfriend, I would just simply not make it without them. You know what I mean? I don't think I could like really push ahead. But with as far as gear and like physical objects and like where I live, what I'm doing, I think all of those are almost like theater. It's like we could be in a different play and on a different stage with a different backdrop, and we're totally okay. And maybe losing stuff is really good for you, and also learning to lose stuff, which is hard, is also really good for you.
I know, it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's the worst. I don't know anyone, trauma or no trauma, who's stoked on losing the people in their life.
Oh yeah, it'll fuck you up, man.
It's just not it's really no bueno.
Yeah,
it's the worst. It's the worst. It is the worst possible thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all scared of death, but really we're scared of death happening to the people around us, because once we're dead, we won't even know what that feel. We're dead. It's not dead. Yep. It's the fear of losing others that we're scared of. We think it's our own because we're so damn self-involved, but in reality, maybe that's a byproduct of being so scared to love deeply because we'll lose the people we love. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
And I do believe that the creative spirit in all of us and the artist in all of us is always in a conversation with that unspoken part of our psyche, and that death, rebirth, and loss and grief and all of those things we don't really articulate or want to even think about. Even if it's just beamed to us, somehow in the collective unconscious, I think artists tend to translate some of that pain into beauty.
Yes.
and that's really the only way that we can live through it. I know you said you couldn't and you wouldn't survive, but it's wild what people survive, their
Yeah.
situations
Yeah.
that they survive from. And
Yep.
often there's a creative element that helped, that they did something
Yeah.
that they could transform that grief into something, even if it was just for themselves. It's not that it
Yep.
has to be a commodity, but
Yeah.
yeah. Are there people that really, you talked about your friends and your girlfriend, are they your main inspirations for your creativity, or is it an inborn thing? And then it's a two-part question. And then the
Yeah.
other part is, how did music originally find you? So maybe you could, maybe I like to go backwards. I'm left-handed. You'll have to pardon
Yeah.
me.
This is great. This is great. I I think that I think that the urge to be uh mm, to express myself like melodically through musical notes has been with me forever because I first started taking piano lessons when I was like 6 years old, 7 years old, and then I got a guitar when I was like 11. And I think from that, I think that there just hasn't been many days when I haven't been making music in whatever way, whether it's like casually or like intentionally recording. Mostly, honestly, since I was like 18, I've been recording a lot, like almost every day in some capacity I've been recording. And it's just in some ways it's like a beautiful way to categorize and to remember all of these ideas and these experiences. And then on another part, I just like building. So, I've always liked multi-track recording and actually like building ideas up through like multi-track recording, because the thing that I discovered when I was 15 is that when you're recording and you record one part on top of the other and then the third part on top, there's some exponential discovery that happens that is the most exciting thing I've ever heard. How these parts, it's almost like a symphonic like polyphony thing. When these parts like interlace with each other, something so magic happens. And I think that when something magic happens that you can't even like really plan for, it's something it's like spiritual. You know what I mean? This isn't it's not something that's like mathematically like like maybe even in the cards. Like it's just something added in the air. And that shit has driven my whole life. And so that's what I do every day. That's what I did, yesterday. I have a once a week electronic project on Thursday. We have 8 hours of recording, and then almost every other day I'm in the studio, which is where I am now. Sometimes I'm here for 10 minutes. Sometimes I'm just like, not today. You know what I mean? And other times it's clicking, and I've stopped. I used to be really mean to myself in recordings. Like I think most musicians are like actually very cruel, and like I think most musicians have a very toxic relationship with themselves, with creativity. And I used to do that forever. And then through that like thing of like making a lot of music, I just don't have any pressure to do anything anymore. And maybe it's part of it is just that as you get older, you just like realize it's all like, you're in a vast like simulation or it's a game, and like you've completely created these like false, like really painful um barriers to just being alive and being joyful. You know what I mean? Like people make it hard on themselves, you know what I mean? And like, so I just don't really have that anymore. And often being in here, I don't know, a lot of times I record, I don't even release it. And I don't think it's good or bad that I don't release it. And I don't even think what I'm doing is good or bad. I just think it's like a little puzzle that I'm doing. I might as well have like a train set in a garage and I'm just running some dumb train around, And as long as I stick to my schedule of 2 records a year, I don't really care. You know what I mean? And 2 records come out, people can like them or not like them. It honestly does not matter to me. It just really doesn't, because I'm doing
Wonderful.
the best version of what I hear in my head. That's all I can do. you know?
It's so wonderful. I rejoice in that switch for you.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean. The beating yourself up thing is just,
Oh,
that's, oh, how's that working out is what I always ask myself when I like
no.
start going down that road. I'm like, has that helped your work
Yeah.
increase the creativity?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
being stalked by yourself. It's horrible. It's just like it's the end of all love, softness, creativity, riskiness. It's the end of everything. We've all been there.
Yeah. David Lynch said negativity is the enemy of creativity. And I freaking love that
100%.
quote. And it's
100%.
true. It's like like for me, I could be really inspired, but as soon as I get negative in any capacity, whether it's like, oh, I don't have time to do this, or, oh, I don't like this track. So I'm not, whatever it is, they're just, or, the soup I made sucks. It's too salty.
Yeah.
And then I go try to sing or go do anything. It doesn't happen. It's just,
Yeah.
it killed it. It's just any negativity. I was just talking with Alex Ebert and Sam I and a few other amazing artists about that, about joy.
Mm-hmm.
And the need to make more joy in the world. It's just such an important thing as artists that we're focused on that, not on beating ourselves and each other up or competing, but how do we lift up the joy quotient? How do we like bring that up? The energy of joy is so needed right now. And I think a lot of that is just living like you are, true to your art, whatever that means, whenever you feel it means that. Like there's not, there is something to be said for the fact that you obviously had an affinity for gear and studio and are super bright in that area. So you have, like you said, something to fall back on that's paying the bills. It comes from a place of privilege to assume that, you can just live to your full intention to some extent without paying the bills, right? So, of course, there's always got to be some day job usually attached if you're not like going for that. I'm going to chart and be a Grammy nominated artist.
Yeah.
I don't think like if you focus on that, you get there anyway. I
Yeah.
think when you focus on truth, you might get there.
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, this has been so fun and I could keep talking to you all day, but we have Spacemoth in the waiting room.
Yeah, we do. Hell yeah. Love it.
I am so stoked to now know who Spacemoth is because of you, John Vanderslice.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're awesome.
I love this so much. Best backgrounds ever, you two. I've been meaning to talk about your wallpaper, John, and now Spacemoth joining us. Do you go by Miriam?
Miriam, yeah.
Okay, Miriam. Okay. It's really nice to meet you.
You
Thanks
too.
for being on LaunchLeft. Your music rocks. I was telling John, I was like, thank you so much for introducing me to a new artist that I think is badass. Yeah.
Well, I owe John so much for my music career because he helped me so much with becoming an engineer and a producer and inspired so much of my own music. So this is so fun.
Can we pause? Can we pause to cry?
Yeah, let's cry.
I love it.
That's so awesome.
Well, that's what we're here to do. We're here to like, I think it's really people, man, there's a lot of, and MQ will attest to this. There's a lot of weird ego stuff in music, like especially men that are tripping, man. They are just tripping out. And it's just like, this is a collaborative medium. We're here to collaborate, to inspire, to like be mentored, to mentor, to be stoked, to be challenged. And like, there's nothing better than when you have a creative dialogue with someone. It's so fun. It's so exciting. And that's how we stay creatively inspired, is by having like people that are inspiring to us and vice versa. And it's a whole complicated ecosystem,
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, I saw that window, working at Tiny Telephone for the first time as an artist. And like, I had worked at other studios before and it felt a little bit weird. It felt a little bit like the engineer that I was working with sometimes was like trying to dominate the process a lot. And what I loved so much about working at Tiny Telephone, working with JV and the engineers who worked there was just like, wow, this is such a collaborative process. And there's so much excitement in like the gear that's used and interacting with like weird instruments. Like I remember I have like this one memory that I'll never forget. And it was like one of my first recording sessions at Tiny Telephone with JV. And one of the pieces of outboard gear was acting up, and it was the Eventide H949. And he had to hit it with a hammer to make it work. And then it did the coolest thing ever. And we ended up recording it in the song. And it was like one of the coolest parts of the record.
It's unbelievable. It's real shit. Like you're hearing a glitch in real time, and then you're like inspired by it.
Yeah.
And it changes your life. You're like, oh, you can accept like this. And it's also wild because it's like that's a digital piece of gear that also has analog front and back end. So you're in between, you're navigating every world. You know what I mean? Like you're mixing, but you're also doing something in real time, and you're in the digital space realm, but you're also like actually mixing on a linear format. It's just like it crossed all it checked all the boxes.
Yeah, and you're hitting things with hammers. I mean,
yep.
What? I love that was the fix it. Like, oh, gear's busted. Break out the hammer.
Yeah. Love it.
So is that how you met?
Yeah. It was all a friend had mentioned John and Tiny Telephone to me when I was kind of in my early stages of making music and recording. And they were like, I think you would love working at the studio. I think you'd love working with John. So I had reached out to him, and I remember just like my first tour of the studio, I was like, yes, this is it. This is the place. And now I'm there all the time because I work there now. It's like the best. Yeah, it's a total dream.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, every day when I go into Tiny and I make a cup of coffee and like work with a band in the studio, it's like it's the best. And it's cool to have had that experience on the artist side, and then now to have that as an engineer and a producer, and now it's like I'm on the other side of that, and it's so rewarding and so much fun.
Yeah.
That's so cool. The cycle of musician life, right? The cycle of life.
Yep.
To see it from all vantage points, I think does make you a better collaborator and artist no matter what, right?
Oh yeah. I think that like when you start out in studios, you realize how vulnerable you feel as a musician in a studio. Like it's really, really delicate. And I think that MQ and I have probably had the same experience where if studios are not like really hip to that, how delicate it is to be on the other side of the glass, it can feel very harsh, and very uninspiring. So I do think that like at the studio, I think that the default is like a very loving, kind, goofy, open, like, yeah, let's try that. Let's just see what happens. Like, who knows? And no one knows anyways, and it's that kind of sense of discovery, and like that, like it is honestly a gift to be in a studio, and that because there's a dark cloud over a lot of like recording studios. I don't know why. There's like, it's like we sense that when we play shows, sometimes there can be like, unfortunately it's mostly men, like a male sound person that it's just like, whoa, did I say something wrong to this person? Like this is dark energy, man. And it's like,
yes,
and that can kind of happen in studios too. And I think it's a cycle that's probably been repeating itself for 50 years of like a guy that's kind of like bummed out, about things that have nothing to do with the environment, and that there's some people that are going to pay, and that has created a really tough relationship between musicians and bands and live performance and recording studios.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm like a real fan of grumpy people. I don't know why. I just have always really and I think it's because I grew up in studios and performing, and always the sound guy, like you said, or the engineer at a studio, inevitably just so grumpy. Yeah. So I just enjoyed trying to win them over somehow. You know what I mean? I just was like, oh, good, it's a project. I can work on this as we go. Try to make light of how intense. It's like nothing should be this serious. I know it's a very expensive mic. I know that it's like, it's not like I'm throwing a baseball bat at it. Just calm down, but it's interesting. I'm so happy I'm noticing a lot more women getting into live sound certainly at the venues I've been going to, and also, you know, in the studio, and that bringing in the feminine more is so important. Even, you know, even for men, just to bring the feminine energy into those spaces that have been dominated by that sort of real masculine, like only dudes can do it vibe. And it's like, it's not helpful to, you know, music is a very feminine thing, I think. Creativity is this like open-hearted, maternal thing. And so to make it be so square in a way and linear, or certainly in regard to recording studios, the fancy ones that I've been to, and venues that it's like by the book, you know, everything is like cha, and just so uncaring, as if like these bands that are rolling in with very little sleep from the last, you know, like they didn't do anything wrong, and then they get more shit at the next place they land because they got there early and the guy's not there, and they call and it's like, I told you 5, you know, like that's kind of, it's like,
been there. We've been there.
We've all been there. It's not fair, but it's changing, because I think the whole world is changing, thankfully. We're all maybe growing up, maybe consciousness is shifting. It is my aspirations why I talk to artists like you. You both are incredible at what you do, but is to continue to be inspired and reminded of the sacred in art, and how we're all in that, really for that. We're uncovering our best qualities. We're here for a reason, and we're here to discover that reason. And, you know, the more people I talk to that are living that true to purpose and living for that reason, the more inspiring it is to me, and the more it keeps me on that path. So I'm just so grateful to have had this opportunity to meet you both, and oh, what a joy. What a great way to spend my afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for inviting me, JB.
Of course. We had the best time with you, Rain. Thank you.
In the echoes of oases west of LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.